Hi everyone, welcome to the webinar. I'm just going to give it a few seconds for everybody to join us. Just got some people coming in now. Brilliant. So thank you for coming. I'm Nadine and I want to give everyone a really warm welcome for joining us today. So in this webinar, we'll be looking at community engagement in the urban forest. Our speakers, Danielle and Catherine, will be sharing some examples of towns and cities that have successfully engaged their communities, and we will be looking at how communities can be involved in data collection, maintenance, and the management of urban forests. So let me ask our lovely speakers to introduce themselves. Over to you, Danny.
Hi everyone, my name is Danny and I'm one of the Senior Urban Forest Consultants at Treeconomics. It's really lovely to be here with you today and really excited to be talking with Catherine around this topic of sort of community engagement and getting it right. I've been working at Treeconomics now for 5 years and I support lots of different projects, but I tend to specialise in our projects that have either a community engagement or a stakeholder focus. It's something that I really enjoy and feel really passionate about. So hopefully got lots of experience that I can bring to our chat today. So I'll hand over to Catherine to do a little introduction as well.
Yeah, thanks, Danny. Yeah, I'm Catherine Nuttgens. I'm an independent urban forester and I work with different institutions like academic, local authorities, all different institutions to help them kind of get it right with urban forestry. My background's in kind of environmental education and community engagement, but also arboriculture. So I've kind of seen the side of working with lots of different communities, but also sort of in arboriculture all around the country when kind of working for the Woodland Trust and community forestry in Sheffield. So yes, I'm really looking forward to joining Danny on this webinar. It's been lots of fun putting it together, so yes.
Thanks. So Dana, would you like to introduce yourself actually?
Well, good morning from Northern Colorado. So it's morning here, and I'm Dana Karcher. I'm with Davie Resource Group, and I'm always excited to support these webinars with my friend Nadine from Treeconomics. And I've done a lot of community engagement, but I'm always looking forward to learning more from our friends across the pond. So I'm looking forward to moderating some good questions as well.
Cool, thank you. So just a little bit of housekeeping. Can everyone see the questions section in their side panel? So please feel free to ask any questions you've got and we will either answer them right away or we will pick them up later on during the Q&A. You can start entering your questions as soon as you like and we will get to as many as we can. So in the same place as you would put your questions, please go ahead and say hi to us and tell us where you're coming in from. So I'm Nadine and I am signing in from Winkley in mid-Devon in England. And Danny, where are you coming in from?
I'm coming in from Bristol, which is down in the southwest of England.
Cool. Catherine?
I'm from Healy in Sheffield, which is in the north of England in Yorkshire.
And Dana?
I'm from a little town, calling in from a little town at Johnstown, Colorado, which is north of Denver and just about an hour from Rocky Mountain National Park.
Lovely, thanks. So throughout the webinar, I will also be adding some useful links for everybody, so keep an eye on your control panels for those. And just to say that this webinar will be recorded and we will be putting it onto the Treeconomics website by end of play on Monday next week if you wanted to share it with anybody. So before we start today, we're going to launch some polls for you to get you all involved. So Dana, would you be able to launch poll number 1, please? We want to just see who we've got with us here today.
Yes, here we go. Hang on. Did it launch?
I can't. Oh, yes, it did.
There we go. Interesting. I love watching this come in. Almost there.
So that's about, yeah, so that's about right. We've got 35% local authorities. We've got 27% consultants, 27% other, including academics, 5% NGOs, and 4% housing associations. That's brilliant. And we're so pleased to see so many local authorities here today. I think, what is the next poll, Dana? Have we got another one?
The next poll, have you ever been involved in running an urban forest community engagement project? So you want me to go ahead and launch this? This is easy, just a yes, no.
It's really interesting. Yeah, this is kind of what we thought. It's about half and half. It's slightly more for no than yes, but basically half and half.
Right.
Okay, and our third poll, I can't remember the question on this, the particular question. It's a sliding scale.
Right. So on a scale of 1 to 5, how important is it to involve local people in changes to the urban environment? 5 being the most important. So I'm going to share that one. I think this is kind of a giveaway.
So can you in the background see what's happening here? You can see the results coming in.
Yep, I can.
Yeah.
I can. I don't think the attendees can.
I bet it's really interesting.
Yeah.
It's a secret.
Yeah, it's very secret. We have 81% saying 5. We have 15% saying 4 and 3% saying 3.
Good.
0, 1 and 2. And we've got another sliding scale on the next poll.
Yes, so this one says on a scale of 1 to 5, how much positive difference do community groups make in local tree projects, or make 2 local tree projects? Of course, 5 being the highest. So I'll launch this one.
Okay, so it's around 40% for number 5, 33% for 4, 20% for 3, 4% for 2, and 2% for 1. That's a lot of numbers. Most people thought it was 5. Okay, and I think the last one, I think the next one is the last poll, isn't it, Dana?
Yes, so on a scale of 1 to 5, how costly is it when landowners communicate poorly with local people? 5 being the most costly. I love this question.
I suppose it depends where you are in the country and what your experience is of this.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see what people say.
That's true. Oh, that's interesting, actually. That is interesting, because we've got about a third of people saying 5, a third saying 4, and a third saying 3. Yeah. Okay.
Interesting.
That is interesting. Thank you for participating in those. So hopefully we can share some really good tips with you today on good practice in involving your communities. So thank you so much. I'm going to stop talking now, and I'm going to hand over to Danny from Treeconomics. Thanks, Danny.
Thank you. Just while we change presenter and things, that was super interesting. It's really helpful to kind of get a feel for who we've got and kind of the work that you might get involved in. Really interesting to hear those proportions that Danielle was talking through, and Nadine, when those polls were coming in. So I'm just going to share my screen. 1 second. Okay, has that come up all right?
Yes.
Lovely, lovely. Right. So, yeah, really excited to have everyone here today. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm hoping this will be a really interesting and really helpful session for everybody. Catherine and I both work in various, have worked with lots of different sort of community groups, and we thought it'd be a really nice opportunity to maybe share some of the things that we found through our work and share some really great examples of getting it right, so kind of focusing on those really positive aspects. So sorry, my slides are just having a bit of a moment. There There we go. So I've already introduced myself, so this slide, we can slide straight past it. But as I say, I'm Danielle Hill and I'm one of the senior urban forest consultants at Treeconomics. Our mission at Treeconomics is sustainable treescapes for everyone, and we get involved in lots and lots of different projects that kind of fit with this mission. We work with lots of different organisations, from local government, local authorities, major landowners, developers. Some of you on the call today might even spot your logo on the slide. It's just a sample of a couple of the organisations and companies that we work with. And as I say, primarily I tend to specialise in our projects that have a community or a stakeholder engagement focus. So as we're starting our session today talking about communities, I thought it'd be really nice to sort of think back a little bit about sort of where does this passion come from and this kind of emotional connection, because we often talk about the benefits that trees provide to us, such as their provision of shade and their ability to store carbon, but there's also a real passion for trees and a strong sort of cultural and spiritual significance that, you know, goes back a long time, and often trees symbolize things like life and growth in many cultures. So when I started planning for the session, I did a bit of reading, and I found this really interesting article by the Woodland Trust about folklore and mythology, which got me a bit hooked for a few minutes. So I thought I would start with a couple of those just to get us going. So in both British and Scandinavian mythology, ash trees are known as healing trees, which I'm going to come back to that sort of healing connection right at the end of this session today. Oak is referred to as a sacred tree throughout Europe, from the ancient Greeks to the Norse to the Celts. Blackthorn is considered a magical tree in Celtic mythology and was considered to be home to fairies. And the Celtic name for rowan also has a similar link, translating to mean wizard's tree. I love those facts. They were all completely new to me. I'd not heard those ones before, so I just thought it'd be a nice place to start. So I've been really fortunate to work sort of throughout my career with people from sort of nursery age right up to retirement, and something which always brings sort of a smile to my face is to see people's sense of awe and wonder of trees. I think it's something that comes very naturally to many of us when we're children, developing those observation skills being a core part of our kind of education. And I know that personally, you know, when I'm really busy, I'm getting caught up with kind of all the day-to-day things that I need to get done, I can easily forget about that kind of sense of wonder and that feeling of like, you know, it's amazing looking at trees and that kind of wonderful feeling that it gives you. But I'm always amazed at how quickly it can come back. So even when, you know, you stop for 5 minutes just to look at something or move some weeds or something like that, it's amazing how quickly you can suddenly become quite fascinated with nature again, and particularly trees. So it's sort of those moments of quiet that enable it to come back. And I'm sure that even in those really busy times when we're not aware of it, that connection and that sense of wonder is still always there. For example, I wonder sort of how many of us find that subconsciously we're really drawn to areas with tree cover versus areas without. I found this really nice quote in my reading that I thought was a really nice way of sort of encapsulating what I wanted to open the session with today, that the presence of natural settings can have a soothing and healthful effect, and some people will feel better, heal faster when they're exposed to landscapes that have natural character. And in the current year, when we're sort of thinking about that emotional link to trees, it led me to think about the sycamore gap tree and specifically the reaction sort of within the public. The felling of this really iconic tree, which had stood along Hadrian's Wall for 300 years, sparked a huge reaction, and I think a lot of disbelief among people here in the UK, but also far beyond. And I mean, after all, it wasn't just sort of any tree, it had become part of the landscape and in many ways a symbol of that area. I'm sure many generations of local people and visitors had spent time walking, photographing, talking next to this tree in this really iconic and unique location. I think maybe, you know, I sort of spent some time digesting it while putting together this presentation. I think maybe it feels as though people felt the felling of this particular tree was not just a loss in terms of the landscape, but also a personal loss. And in addition, you know, a real frustration that this sort of piece of cultural heritage could be deliberately cut down. But there's been a really positive and lovely story to come out of it, although it was really sad, and you know, there's a lot of really sort of negative feeling about it. There's this really lovely project that's been ignited called the Trees of Hope project. So it's something that's really positive, and this project aims to ensure that the legacy of that beautiful sycamore gap tree lives on. And for those of you who aren't familiar with it, 49 saplings, one to represent each foot of the height that the tree was at the time it was felled, are going to be gifted to communities around the country to be planted in publicly accessible spaces which have a real strong emotional connection for people and the local community. And Catherine, who's here with us today, is actually the external judge for the Trees of Hope project. So I'm really, really looking forward to hearing the kind of stories and locations for these 49 saplings once all the judging has gone through. So really, really exciting. And there's a really good reason why we decided to start our talk today with those emotional connections to trees, and that's because we're going to be talking about working together with communities and how this emotional connection leads to passion and how we can work together to turn this passion into action. Now, I've really enjoyed putting together this webinar because I've learned quite a lot of things. I didn't actually know, but Dave Dattenborough is the Vice President of the Conservation Volunteers. And I said to Catherine yesterday that I think almost everything that he says becomes a fantastic quote. And I read this and thought, that's exactly what I wanted to say.
Such a good quote.
It's brilliant, isn't it? He said, no one will protect what they do not first care about, and no one will care about what they've never experienced. The conservation volunteers are the unsung heroes of the environment, and I just don't think you could encapsulate it any better. You know, that experience in nature, and particularly those feelings of awe and wonder, are the real foundations of protecting our urban forests. As I mentioned right at the start, I lead on a lot of our community focused projects, so particularly our urban forest asset valuation projects, which you might know as i2eco surveys. Leading on these projects has given me a really fantastic opportunity to work with lots of different community organisations. As part of those projects, just for a bit of background, what we do is we bring together community volunteers. We provide training and equipment and, of course, support throughout the project to enable our community volunteers to survey all of the trees and ground cover across a sample of plots across a whole urban forest or treescape. And that includes trees on both public, private land, in urban areas, in towns, across counties. The landscape varies, but that same principle of looking at a sample of areas across public and private land is kind of the core principle. And with the project holding value for sort of both the local authority and the community groups, it's a really fantastic way to start that relationship through sharing data at the end of the project. And this can then be used to sort of inform a strategic master plan or a similar strategy, which means that everyone can work together in a really coordinated way towards a shared goal or a set of shared goals. And I think, thinking about it, if everyone's working in isolation, you could quite easily end up in a situation where you have the local authority tree officer planting in this area and community group planting in this area. And you could even end up planting the exact same species, which, you know, there's an opportunity there to have further diversified the population if there was kind of some shared information or shared goals. So we wanted to share the potential benefit of working together because it's of such great importance. It's such a joy for me working with community groups. I really, really love it. You know, community groups have a real passion and a real love for their local area and a determination to care and enhance it, not just for themselves, but for everyone who lives, works and visits the area. I'm going to just change the slide. Oh, there we go. I'm not going to focus on the challenges because I think we all kind of understand and you know, those challenges are are often very common across lots of different areas, but there are challenges and there are constraints which make it difficult to bring those two groups together, but we're going to try and focus today on getting it right. And I wanted to just share some examples of key things that I've seen across lots of different projects which have worked really well or have led to sort of positive action. So many local authority tree teams are really stretched and need to prioritise tree works for those that are of greatest concern. And often working alongside the local authorities are community groups who are really passionate about improving their local area, enhancing the quality of their green spaces and increasing tree cover. And there's a really amazing opportunity for sort of bringing together contractors, community groups and local authorities. And there are situations where that's worked really, really well. Some of the really core sort of benefits or opportunities from that happening is being able to work together towards the same goals. So both working towards one goal will get you there much quicker than both people working on separate goals. Coordinating tree establishment and care between the three teams, the local authority, the contractor and the community groups, can really help to maximise survival rates. And you've also got the opportunity to share resources, share expertise, deliver training. It's a really fantastic opportunity. And I'm just going to slide on quickly because my time's disappearing quite fast. So the last thing that I wanted to mention before I hand over to Catherine are some of the real, I suppose, potential impacts and things that have worked really well. We're all stronger when we work together. And if we work together, we've got an opportunity to provide things like training for volunteers. And I think if community groups have a really good organisational structure that helps to coordinate the work, it helps to ensure that you've got a couple of people who can be a point of contact for that community group. It helps, it leads directly into this sort of third one around having really good communication between the local authority team, contractors and community groups, and keeping that communication on a regular cycle so that you can coordinate your work and work together towards a shared goal. Having a shared sort of central resource hub is another really good opportunity, and running projects that are mutually beneficial. So I did mention obviously sort of urban forest asset valuations or iTree projects. There are lots of other different ones, but another good example which was shared with me was something like the Wildlife Trust Woodland Condition Assessment. So getting people involved in a survey is a really nice programme because you've got that sort of training, that structure and those resources to help get people on board and sort of introduce them to the world of surveying. So those are just a couple of things which sprung to mind or came to mind when talking to people about things that have worked really well. I'm going to hand over to Catherine now, who's going to give us some fantastic examples of projects that she's worked on or that she knows about, which further illustrate this. So I'm just going to try and hand over so that she is the presenter. Bear with me 1 second. Okay.
Oh, there we go. Thanks, Danny. It's right. Can you see my screen?
Not yet, but it might just be loading up a second.
A little thing.
You can see it, you just need to put it into presentation mode.
Excellent. There we go. Is that all there now?
You got it.
Yeah.
Excellent. Right. So yeah, so I'm Catherine Nuttgens. Previously I lived in Sheffield. I was a tree officer in Sheffield, done lots of landscape heritage work, all that sort of thing. But now as an independent urban forester and kind of with the experience of working in Sheffield and all around the country, I'm really interested in kind of how trees and people interact. And one of the things that's been great to work on recently is with the School of Biosciences, the Urban Tree Observatory, on a knowledge exchange. And what that was, it was getting everybody together, kind of all sorts of people that have different sort of thoughts around trees, so campaigners, academics, from landscape architects to entomologists, local authority staff, charities, all different people that have an interest in trees. We met in October to discuss 3 things. Now, the first thing was, let me just bring it up, there we go. So we wanted to look, one of the first of the 3 things was about sort of trees that are better understood, are better protected, a bit like thinking about what Danny was saying about, you know, that David Attenborough quote. And we got everyone to have a think around this. And Mac from Birmingham Tree People actually talked to us around what they'd done in Birmingham. Now, Birmingham Tree People are probably the best, well, probably the most established community group in England. There may be others, and I'm very happy to hear about them, but they've been going for quite a long time. And they actually train people up. So Mac delivers, I think, the basic tree inspection and does it all the way around. So they've got community groups that are actually really knowledgeable about urban trees. And you know, and that starts to spread. So things like Coventry and Warwick and places like that, they're also kind of having that training from Mac and like sort of learning from Birmingham Tree People and how to be a really good and efficient community group. But I think what was really interesting, and you can see this on this illustration here, where we've got someone called More Than Minutes to actually live illustrate all our discussions. It's kind of, the themes are kind of, you know, quite similar, you know, the things about learning through being involved, and utilising those community connections, because that's certainly all, when I've visited sort of community groups and kind of tree focused people, what really works is when you have everybody working together, when you've got the local authority, the community group, everyone's trying to move in the same direction. And in that way you can kind of have the economies of scale, you can you know, you can do really amazing things, and utilize the swiftness of a community group to get in there quickly, but also the, you know, the kind of knowledge of a local authority or arborist. But one of the things that came up, I think, and affects us all, is about sort of who's not at the table. I mean, it might be the same in the US as the UK, it wouldn't surprise me, but often it's the same sorts of people that are getting involved. And perhaps we're not hearing, kind of, there's not enough listening to what those, you know, those kind of groups that aren't there. So, you know, more culturally diverse groups, you know, different kind of, a lot of, it's kind of like nice middle class people doing nice middle class things with trees, who, you know, looking at other things, you know, other people, and how do we hear those stories, and what people need is something that we perhaps need to look at. One of the landscape architects was saying, where are the social scientists in all of this? And I think that's really important. There's often kind of a flippant in that trees are really good for mental and physical health, but actually, how have we looked at that? What's the detail around that? So something to think about. So next one. The next one was about emerging technologies. This was done from, there's a branching out project. It's called Branching Out Based. Kind of, this bit was based in York, but it's part of the Natural Environment Research Council UK Treescapes project. And they've had lots of fun. I've really enjoyed working with them, actually, because they're doing all these exciting things with designers and IT people. And one of their things was Chat GP Tree, they called it. So this tree, this picture of a tree, this is a horse chestnut. It's got, bless it, it's got Pseudomonas, but it has got a lovely day. But had a little QR code on it, and you could scan that, and it would take you to the app. But you could have a little chat to the tree, and the tree, he was feeling a bit sad because of the Pseudomonas on his bark. But, you know, he was all right because it was, you know, nature persists and all that kind of thing. So that was a great way of turning a tree into a person. And it was fascinating to see how people, you know, how people responded to that. I mean, really interesting. So for some people, that it was like amazing. It made them like feel really emotionally attached to the tree. For other people, they found it as a real barrier to nature because they were looking at their phone and not looking at the tree. But I thought just that kind of, suddenly this kind of technological thing, mixing it with a very kind of old and, you know, kind of a sense of nature and untouchability, kind of had that slight, you know, some people were awe and wonder, it was all about that. Other people were a bit more uncanny valley. But I think it's great that we're thinking about these things, you know, that this is perhaps it's a way of capturing those stories when we're looking at, and, you know, getting that tree equity. So yeah, fascinating stuff. The last thing that we looked at, which is very integral to Sheffield, is around tree conflicts. Some of you may not know, some of you probably do know, that in Sheffield between 2012 and 2016, there was a horrendous tree war where the council had decided that they were going to remove a third of the street trees. And then obviously there was some backlash to that, but then because of the kind of stubbornness of councillors and sort of things like that, the conflict grew and grew and grew. And actually I could probably do a talk about how to create a international tree campaign, because that's kind of what they did. They created an internet, it got everywhere. But for us in Sheffield, it was hard. It was hard for all of us. It was not fun. But I mean, what's been really useful is what we can learn from tree conflicts, and how we, you know, how can we turn it round? I think, you know, the first thing is that it should be avoided at all costs. If you are a local authority, it's kind of like a political explosion, and you lose all the goodwill of people. And also use that expertise, because something that happens is often the experts, like the arboriculturalists, will, you know, their voice is no longer heard. It's about kind of either the opinion of the council, opinion of the campaigners. It's quite hard, you know, you can often lose some of that expertise. But what I have seen through where it's really worked well is that if there is consultation, if the council listen, or whoever the landlord is at the beginning, then that helps, you know, be on the front foot of it, and you know, and in that way it can be solved, because I think everyone's a human being, we're all trying to get there, and often it's kind of those misunderstandings that aren't fully explained that can, you know, that can be talked about and worked at, you know, in a positive way. So but yeah, I mean, one of the things I was going to say, that this knowledge exchange is something that happened not very long ago, so we're going to write all of this up. I'll probably do a bigger presentation around it, but it was really fascinating. There's lots of insights that we can get out of this. So yeah, so I was just going to say there are some positives that come out of conflict. One of which I would say the doing, like, because there's lots of talking, isn't there, but we need people to do stuff. And that's the kind of bottom up side, you know, where people are down on the ground, like this small child planting a tree. Kids Plant Trees community interest company. They are a very little community interest company who's kind of, they do what they say on the tin, really. And basically, after the tree protests, there's Steph, Rachel, and Anna, and they were really interested in just doing something positive, you know, something nice to get children out, get them planting trees. You know, there's all the benefits of it. And then also Tim, who he used to be head of community forestry just before I was. He was there for a long time. He's got all the tree planting expertise. And they started off almost just by supplying teas and coffees for some of the tree planting events that we were doing in community forestry in Sheffield. So this is one of the first ones, and it was so great for us to have that support from them, you know, just kind of being the community link. But then they've kind of grown, you know, in the last few years they've grown a bit more. They're doing some great stuff with schools around the region. You know, they're working with, you know, doing Kids Plant Trees literally with the schools. This is up at Lindley Bank, and they've planted a hedgerow here in Sheffield. And then they're also working with school grounds, and where they can help pupils get involved with the school grounds and learn a little bit more about nature and climate and things like that. So I mean, they're a very small charity, but they are hopefully going to go on to bigger things. And I think it's things like that, you know, that's where the good stuff is, that those links together are really good. Birmingham Tree People came out of conflict, and they're massive now. So, you know, there's some really good things that can grow and be super positive. So that's me. I'm So yeah, I'm just going to see if I can pass back my my webinar. It's let's have a look here. Okay, I'm going to pass it over to Donna. There we go. So hopefully I can find you back again. Let's have a look. So thanks everybody. There we go. Oh, there we go. Are you there, Danny? Donna, I think you're on mute.
I got it now. So many buttons. So many buttons for early in the morning. Are you ready to move into some questions and some conversation?
We could have some. Go on, Danny.
Catherine and I have got lots and lots and lots to talk about, and we're probably running a bit short on time. What we were going to ask, perhaps what we could do, one of the questions that we were really interested to hear was if anyone had any other really nice examples of where you've had really positive impacts from community engagement projects that you've been working on. We could maybe give people about maybe 5 minutes to pop those in the chat, and Catherine and I could just talk about, I can go through it really quickly. Catherine and I have got a couple more examples of other projects that we just thought would be really nice to highlight. Should we do that? Is that a good plan, Catherine?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. So I mean, we thought it'd be nice to have a proper discussion, because Danny and I talked for ages about all the kind of good things that we got very much on a sidetrack and could talk for hours about lovely forest schools and owls and, you know, things like that. But I think, I mean, one thing that's been really, you know, just literally today, actually going through all these Sycamore Gap Trees of Hope applications, of which there is 1,000, is how emotional people feel about trees. It's quite heavy emotional labour actually just going through all this such, you know, feelings and care and hope in a way. But Danny, I mean, you know, you talked a lot about the emotional connections about trees. So how is it, do you think, that kind of like, you know, there are examples that you think where they've helped mental health and things like that?
There's a really lovely example which I really wanted to share and celebrate a little bit today. So it's a presentation, or it's a project which was recently presented at our conference, at the iTree conference in Dundee, and I think at the Arbor Association conference. If you want to hear it in full, I'm sure there's a recording online. But it's a fantastic project called iTree for UA, which is an iTree eco project in Ukraine. And I was just so inspired to hear about it. It's an amazing idea. I can't imagine what it must be like to be living in a war zone, and I just thought, what an amazing thing to launch a project like iTree for people who are living there in Ukraine at the moment. And I just thought there were a couple of things that she said in her presentation. I just thought it'd be really nice to share and just really highlight, I suppose, what an impact working as a community group or working with trees can have for people, and the impact on their lives. So a couple of the things that she highlighted were sort of being a part of a like-minded community and continuing lifelong learning, and those two are really key among any sort of community project. The opportunity to, you know, learn new skills, to gain work experience working in green jobs. You know, the fantastic thing about iTree is it's actually a survey that professionals do, so it's a really nice sort of way to experience and kind of see what people do who work in these kind of jobs. She also mentioned about sort of shifting the focus from war-related threats to public activism and building a better future locally. So really thinking about, you know, the future and building hope and envisaging what their town or city or the area that they live in is going to be like in the future. She said it was sort of gave people that feeling of being alive and living a really meaningful life in a very unusual and not normal reality. Taking care of yourself and boosting your physical and mental health while spending time among and caring for trees. And I think it just really resonated, and I just thought a fantastic project, and I really must celebrate it, because it just illustrates how healing trees can be, and it brings us back again to that really strong emotional connection, which leads to this sort of passion and you know, drive to do better and to look after our trees. So yeah, I just really wanted to highlight that one, and actually really to celebrate what a fantastic idea that project is, and I'm definitely going to be following along and look forward to hearing what comes out of it. And I think maybe what would be really good before we go to sort of some questions and looking at what people have popped in the chat, Catherine, I just wondered if you might I don't know, have some thoughts on how we could sort of summarise what we've talked about today, because as you say, you and I could talk forever about this kind of stuff. I just thought maybe it'd be nice to try and like knit it all together for everybody towards the end.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think community engagement and trees and people are often forgotten about as something. They're kind of a bit like tree watering. They're kind of the thing that you remember to do last minute. You think, oh yeah, we better do some of this. But I think done well, then it means that you've got far more facilities and tools that you can use within the community to keep trees alive, to be there sustainably for projects and for and just having kind of the support for the next thing to come along. Because say we talk a lot about the benefits of trees, but the benefits benefit the people, and the people need to appreciate those benefits. So I mean, just one little example. I mean, I visited, I got a call when I was at the Woodland Trust from Hull, and they were kind of a bit worried about some of the work that we're doing in Queen's Gardens. They had a lot of poplars there. So I went to go and have a look at the poplars, and they weren't great trees. They kind of provided a kind of an avenue of trees, be these large poplars walking along, but it meant that all this green space wasn't being utilised, and the poplars themselves were kind of falling to bits. But you can see it's a lot of tree, and people are going to care about them. You can see that like that it is going to be significant. But what was really impressed me was the way that they'd kind of employed someone to actually address people's concerns, so that when people rang up or emailed or commented on social media, they would say, well, come and meet us on site, we'll explain what we're doing, here's the project. If you've got any concerns, you can pick up the phone, we'll talk about it. And in that way, the original kind of people that were worried about the project were actually starting to be a big advocate for it. And I think it just kind of demonstrates like how you can do it, how you can sidetrack. Don't be scared of people being worried about change. People are always worried about change. The point is like address their concerns by just listening is sometimes enough, I think.
Yeah,
so
maybe sort of bringing people in and having that discussion early on so that they feel part of the change, rather than it just happening and it coming as a shock with no sort of information. Or I think that's really, really key.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. So people understand things, then they're much more likely to protect it. That's what it is all about, really. When we're thinking about urban forestry, those trees are there and are planted for the people that live in the cities. I mean, you have ancient woodlands, but even they're managed for the people that live in the cities. The whole thing is kind of for people. The biodiversity is for people. It's there. The reason that we worry about climate change is because people are at risk. The nature will probably be fine geologically, but and that's the thing. I think if you can get it right, then it means your project's going to be far more resilient and sustainable into the future.
I think that's a brilliant way to summarise. Thank you, Catherine.
That leads us into some questions, if you guys are ready, because I've got a question that actually fits that really well, and it's from our mutual friend Phil in the States, and he said, could you give an example of when you got it wrong and how that helped you ultimately get it right? I think that's really brilliant.
Yes,
it's probably for you.
I can think of one. So over the pandemic, it's a nightmare. So we've got money from a charity to plant trees, and we'd sort of scoped out where we were going to plant the trees. But usually, if you plant trees in a public area, then, you know, there's a process around consulting. You know, you go and talk to the local friends group, you talk to the schools, you talk to everyone. You put signs up on the, you know, signs in the local areas explaining what you're going to do. But because the whole thing, we were locked down totally to Bingham with us, people remember, and then like we had to plant the trees, because I did say, well, can we shift this to next year because we haven't done any consultation, but it was like, no, they need to go in this year. So basically we paid contractors to plant all of these little whips. So it was about, I don't know, probably half a hectare or something of lots of little whips. But we weren't allowed to meet anyone. It was so hard. But the trees went in. What happened afterwards, like within a couple of weeks, the first thing was it snowed, and it turned out that the places where the trees had gone in were excellent sledging areas. So a lot of them were sledged on. And then, which obviously if we'd talked to people, we would have found that out. And the second thing was that people just totally objected to the trees because we'd just done to their park, and they just pulled out it was taking some effort. They pulled out every single tree, there were like 2,000 trees. But I thought it really demonstrates how to do it properly. You know, when you engage local people, they support the trees. There was an example where we were working on a different site and we were planting with the school, and she said, oh, my dad rides his motorbike around this park. I was like, does he? She said, oh, but I'll tell him not to ride over my trees in future. You know, and in that way, you know, you think, well, it's good because we're not kind of going with our wagging local authority fingers saying don't do it, but it's actually coming from children and from, you know, really positive, soft messages about why things are good. So yeah, so that's my example anyway. It's yeah, you learn a lot from getting things wrong.
Yeah, I agree. Danny, do you have anything to add to that? Because we've got a couple more questions.
I think that was an absolutely spot on example. I'm sure there's probably quite a few in both of our bags, but let's go on to another question, then we can cover a few different topics.
So this is from our friend Naomi, and she said that she developed and ran the Asian longhorned beetle New York City public outreach program that reached millions of city dwellers and used a train the trainer approach to connect people with the trees that they, you know, that are in their neighborhood as a way of turning the disaster into something positive. And I love that example. But she also, yeah, it's good. She also asked this question though. I was wondering if any of the training to, I think she's saying, took it back to the beginning, how citizens can engage with the entire urban forest management practice, beginning with planning. So when you're doing the plans, how, you know, can you get people involved at the very beginning?
I'm happy to take that one if that's okay with you. I mean, firstly, really love that example of using that, you know, it's a really, really terrible, you know, pest and disease, and actually being able to turn that into a really nice engagement project to get people outdoors and accessing their nature. So I thought that was a really lovely, really nice example, and I'm going to scribble that down in my notebook in a minute. But in terms of engaging sort of the public and stakeholders through the planning process, I think that's really important personally. It's something that we definitely do at Treeconomics, and we try to encourage all of our clients to do when we're working with them on a strategy, is who can we bring into this? Let's not just develop our long-term goals as a small tree team. Let's think about, well, let's start within the local authority. You know, what other teams could feed into this? Are there any flood risk teams that might want to get involved? Planning teams, parks, ecologists, and thinking wider, you know, net zero and highways teams, things like that. So trying to capture everyone who is actually in a, you know, if you think about it in a diagram, if you put trees in the center, a lot of those roles actually link beautifully into trees, and without realizing it, they're probably a part of a lot of different teams' work. And then once you start moving outside the council, you've got an even bigger sort of sphere of people. And actually, I think with a lot of strategies, when you're talking about the whole of an urban forest, it would be impossible for a couple of people in one tree team to deliver all of the actions that are needed. And I think if you can bring people in from the beginning, they understand why you're doing the strategy, they understand why it's needed, they can be part of designing and really thinking about that long-term focus. They can think about their role within it and how they fit into that programme, and bring it back a little bit to what I was saying earlier. You've got so much passion when you've got community groups. They really want to do a fantastic job, and often, they'll organise themselves and find their own work to do, even if they're not working with the local authority. And it's just such an amazing opportunity when we've got tree teams that are really struggling and really stretched and probably have loads of stuff on their wish list that they would love to do but just aren't able to. And you've got this group of people who are really passionate and really want to do things and have the time. And actually, if you can bring everyone together through the process of bringing that strategy to life, I think it's that really nice way of starting that relationship and getting everyone to work together in a really coordinated way, and sort of working towards the same goals rather than working, like I said earlier, you could quite easily both be planting the same trees in different areas, and actually if you knew which species you were prioritizing, there's more opportunity for diversifying the population. So yeah, I think that's a really great question. Thanks, Naomi.
I really like that too. And I think back to, I began my career working for an urban forest nonprofit in the States. And so the urban forester I worked with in our city was like, you are planting way too many trees. I can't keep up to care for them, because he didn't have the staff. And so we ended up developing a citizen forester program that allowed us, the city went out and allowed us, they taught us, but they taught us to care for the young trees we put in the ground. And so we did that year 1, year 2, year 3. And it really, it supported what the urban forester was trying to do at the time, was, growing the canopy. So, getting those groups engaged in the positive is also really super important. And then also at the same time, using them, and you guys both kind of touched on this when we were talking about using them to help get your thing across, the thing that you need to have done in your community. And, working with them, we used to have these meetings where we would talk about, what do you need next in the city?
Yeah.
And how can we support that? So
it's fascinating to hear it's so similar between us here in the UK and you guys over in the States. That's really interesting.
Oh, there's so many similarities that that are going on. So one of my coworkers asked, Nathan asked, what are good methods to gather an audience in advance of a community engagement event and that you have found successful? So I'm thinking he's meaning like, how do you get people together before it all starts? What's the methodologies that you guys use?
I mean, that's a really interesting question, because kind of a really good answer is to like try and cut down a third of your street trees. That gets people's attention. but perhaps if you don't want to do that, it's something, because there's been a lot of with these treescapes projects, there's been a lot of community consultation events that they've done. One of the issues that they've found is that just people won't come because they're, it's like, well, why should I be interested in this kind of thing? I've got other things to do. But I think if you can try and run things on weekends, if you can try and get in places where people are likely to be, so if you can tag on to other events, having community events, whatever it might be, a little local festival, or I mean, there's kind of supermarkets obviously where people gather and things like that. And I think just having a bit of a marketing plan as well. Working for the Woodland Trust was fascinating, because they have like really, really good communication and the way that they work. And I think you kind of learn to see sort of where things go wrong. So don't forget about having a really good comms strategy, because people are, you know what tree people are like. They're thinking about trees, but actually you need someone who's got that comms kind of mentality that can think, how do we engage people with this? And I mean, when I was working with community forestry, I was really, really happy to recruit one of my community foresters who was a journalist. Amazing, like all these skills. So just have that in mind, to make a plan for what you're going to do and how you're going to engage people.
Real quick question that popped up and it kind of got buried in here. Somebody asked if you could still apply for the Trees of Hope. So, Catherine.
No, sadly, it's closed now. I mean, keep an eye open because I think there are. Yeah, I mean, just pay attention to what's going on and see what's happening. But I think that 49 trees that they're giving out, that's their kind of their big push. And there's been like nearly 1,000 entries.
Wow.
So it's a lot. I mean, it's incredible, isn't it? You know, just a sycamore sapling. You know, 1,000 people have applied to have one of these.
Feelings
So it's high competition.
Yeah, and Naomi followed up on my comment. She said a viable training must include what everyone can do to sustain trees that are already in the ground. How can we ensure that they grow well into maturity? That takes the entire village, but that village must be informed. And, you know, we can't just plant trees for planting trees' sake. You know, we have to, there's that whole purpose. I think one of the things that we continue to see in the planning process that we do is alternative methods beyond meetings. And so, you know, before we just all have meetings where we talk about the planning process and how community can engage in the planning process, you know, what other things are you guys seeing out there that help engage the community, like beyond tree planting, for example, you know, coloring contests or getting children engaged or getting, you know, college age students engaged? What are some of the things that you see that you're doing out there to get other people engaged?
I mean, this is a really broad one, but I was just thinking somebody's face, just like a person. I know you mentioned, Catherine, with that example earlier, that they actually appointed one person to be a point of contact so that they could explain what was going on. And I think maybe sometimes it being a person rather than a letter or a website page or a email, maybe sometimes when it's a person who can really explain and show you and talk to you, and maybe that makes it feel more welcoming. And I don't know if this is true, but if it was me and it was a regular thing and you saw the same face, you start to feel like, oh, I recognize them or I saw them before. And I think things stick in your mind, and maybe having that person creates an environment that's more welcoming and more encouraging. Love the idea of a colouring competition though, and I always love, ever since I saw a presentation a really long time ago from Jenny in Australia about the Tree Tags campaign, love that. I still think that was a fantastic idea, and I can imagine if I was a child I would have loved that. So yeah, that was always stuck in my mind.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. We hung eye-tree tags on trees, a really small community that's surrounded by the city of Denver and some other cities. And we hung the eye-tree tags, and they had QR codes on them that led to a survey. And so that was really kind of fun. Really small city, people love their trees there. That was a really good method of engagement that we really liked. And we also, in that same project, we, rather than holding a community meeting, because community engagement as a consultant costs money, so you have to use use your client's tools the best way you can, right? So rather than have a community engagement meeting at the library or something like that, we had it at the local Vietnamese church, and they served food, and then the meeting was translated into both Vietnamese and Spanish, in addition to English. And so, meeting people where they are is also really critical.
That's a really good idea. I like that. I was going to say, actually, I was thinking about, after you said about the tree tag campaign, we were based on the University of Exeter previously, our office, and after we'd done their eye-tree study, we did tree tags on the campus on a number of trees, and then did a tree trail, and they did a whole map. And I thought that was such a nice, if I'd been joining university, what a lovely way to sort of get to know the site and learn a bit about the trees that are there and just feel quite at home, and feel that kind of sense of ownership, I guess, of the place that you have just arrived in. I thought that was another really nice way. And also bring people together. It was a really nice group of students who didn't know each other beforehand, so it was a really nice way of bringing them together as well. So I thought that was another really good idea.
Yeah, and I mean, things like the emerging technologies and things, the GPT tree was fascinating about the way that people engage with that. you know, and whether there's kind of there's so much going on at the moment with all the visualization and things, and being able to express it in different ways, you know, like the 3D drone images, and you know, so many different ways of mapping and virtual reality, augmented reality. It's it's fascinating stuff, and hope to capture a new audience.
I didn't mean to disappear there for a minute. I'm gone again. Now there I am. Okay. Hitting the wrong buttons. Well, that's about all we have on this end. And there's one more question if you've got time. You guys good? One more question? This is a really good one. Can you share some tips to educate people about the environment who are from low income and less educated areas whose primary concern is their sustenance? They don't care about environment, how to enhance their sense of responsibility, et cetera, et cetera. And I think this is a really good question, especially from our friends from the States too, who are dealing with this with the grants that we got. So if you've got a couple more minutes, it would be really great if you could answer that.
I'm happy to help. I don't know if Catherine, you want to start, because you kind of touched on this a little bit in your presentation about how do we reach further out into the community and kind of get a picture from everybody. So I don't know if you wanted to start.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because the kind of doing with and not to is really important with any community, you know, but being able to listen to what people want and not making assumptions, because I think, because I certainly saw this in Sheffield, and my area as a tree officer was up in North Sheffield, which is kind of not as affluent as the south, and there was a big assumption to say that, you know, people in those areas don't care about their trees, you know, but actually they do, but they've just got other stuff to, you know, they've got bigger stuff to worry about. And I think actually listening to people about the sort of thing that they would like to see, you know, because that care about the environment is there, it's just like there's other higher priorities, and you know, talking about the joy and, you know, the awe and the wonder, and, you know, how can we make your area more green. And another thing, I mean, just from experience, find out where the community's leaders are, make friends with that community leader, because they are amazing powerhouses of things. I'm sure that it's the same worldwide. You know, make those community connections in wherever it is, because they're going to be your greatest allies in sort of getting things done. And I think it's probably the most rewarding work that I've done is when you've traveled quite a distance, when, you know, you start with not very much and end up with something that's really incredible. I find that much more rewarding than kind of the, you know, the nice community groups. They can kind of look after themselves in a way. I mean, they, you know, but it's really nice when you've started with not very much at all and been able to create something amazing. It's very rewarding. Danny, do you have any experience of that kind of thing? You've done lots of community work.
I think you kind of said everything I was thinking of, but around listening and around, yeah, those, you know, people have lots of priorities in their life, and, you know, you have to think about, you have to put things in it, yeah, in order of priority. And yeah, I think that key thing about just listening and understanding what people want and where it would have an impact as well. You know, it might not actually be that helpful to plant it on the road outside their house, but actually their local park might really be missing shade over the children's playground or something like that. So I think, yeah, that, and I think sometimes we think we're really good at listening, but sometimes if you've already got a plan in your mind of what you want to do, it's quite hard sometimes to really listen. And I think maybe that is one of my sort of ideas about how we could help. But yeah, that's really nice. Yeah, really nice question, actually.
Really good question. Yeah, good question. Nadine, I'll let you take it away from here.
Oh, yeah, it's after 3 o'clock. Thanks to everyone who's hung on right to the end. I hope you found this really useful. Before we go, we've got a lot of local authorities and housing associations here. So can I just say, if any of you are thinking about measuring the value of your trees and getting your communities involved in that, there's lots you can do. Also tree strategies, as Danny said, there are loads of ways you can get your local people involved in this. If you'd like to talk to us at Treeconomics, this is absolutely what we do. So feel free to get in touch via our website or email us info@treeconomics.co.uk. We're a lovely team and we would really love to talk to you. You can also see case studies on our website and examples of how we've worked with people in the past. But let me just extend a massive thanks to our speakers, Catherine and Danny. Thank you so much. That was super interesting. And thank you, Dana, for coming in so early in the day to do our Q&A, as always. Appreciate you. Thanks to everyone.
Right, thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your day.